My name is Richard Harrison. I'm 71 years old, and for 45 years I was a cardiologist at Chicago General Hospital. If you're listening to me now, friend, it's because I need to tell you something that broke my heart and almost killed me. My own son, Philip, my only son, tried to murder me. Yes, just like you heard it. For 3 months he was swapping my medication for fake pills, hoping I would die faster so he could inherit my savings in my condo. But he forgot one important thing. I'm a doctor, and half the medical community in Chicago were my students. It all started on a Tuesday morning in October. It was 7 when I woke up with that strange feeling in my chest. That pressure I knew all too well. I'd had my heart attack 6 months earlier. And since then, I religiously took my digoxin, my metoprolol, my aspirin. But that morning, as I made my morning coffee, just the way I like it, I felt that something wasn't right. The shortness of breath had gotten terribly worse in the last 2 weeks. Climbing the stairs of my building on Michigan Avenue had become torture. My legs swelled more every day. And at night, I would wake up choking. It's normal after a heart attack, I told myself. You're old, Richard. Accept reality. But there's something I learned in 45 years of operating on hearts. Never ignore your medical intuition. When something doesn't add up, investigate. Always. That Tuesday, I called Michael Gordon's office on Clark Street. Michael had been my resident 20 years ago. Now he had his own private clinic. I explained my symptoms over the phone and he told me, "Dr. Harrison, come in immediately," on the way to his office. I remembered all the times I had taught Michael to read EKGs. "Look closely at the waves, Dr. Gordon," I used to tell him when he was young. "The heart always tells the truth. You just have to know how to listen." Michael greeted me with that respectful smile my former students always gave me. His office was elegant, with diplomas on the walls and a beautiful view of the skyline. He examined me for a full hour. EKG, echocardiogram, blood tests. The results left him perplexed. "Dr. Harrison," he said, reviewing the papers for the third time, "your cardiac levels are bad, very bad. But according to your file, you are taking all your medications religiously." "That's right, Michael. Philip buys them for me every month, and I take them exactly as prescribed." Michael frowned. "It's strange, doctor. Your symptoms suggest you aren't receiving the proper medication. It's as if you weren't taking anything at all." Those words kept ringing in my head all the way home. As if I wasn't taking anything. I slowly climbed the 3 floors to my condo, feeling my heart protest with every step. Once home, I sat in my favorite armchair, the brown leather one that Susan gave me for my 50th birthday. From there I could see the photo of my wife on the coffee table, smiling at me with that sweetness I miss so much. "What do you think, my love?" I asked her portrait. "Am I becoming paranoid?" But the paranoia of an experienced doctor has its reasons. I went to my medicine cabinet and took out all the medication boxes Philip had brought me last month. I observed them carefully under the light of my desk lamp, the same desk where I had written thousands of prescriptions to save lives. The boxes looked normal. The seals were there. The pharmaceutical names were correct. But when I examined them more closely, I noticed something strange. Tiny marks on the corners, as if they had been opened and glued back together. The cardboard tabs showed slight deformations. My heart began to beat faster. Carefully, I opened one of the digoxin boxes. The pills looked exactly like the originals. Same white color, same shape, same size. But there was something about their texture that didn't convince me. I held them between my fingers. I smelled them. They didn't have that slight chemical scent characteristic of the medication. "My God," I murmured. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned in bed, feeling my doctor's mind connecting the dots. Philip had insisted so much on taking charge of my medications. "Dad, you rest. I'll take care of everything," he had told me after the heart attack. "It's the least I can do after everything you've done for me." It had seemed so considerate, so loyal. After years of disappointments with his failed businesses, my son was finally showing maturity and responsibility. The next day I called Charles Harris. Charles had been one of my best students in the 90s, and now he was the chief pharmacist at St. Joseph's Hospital. "Charles," I said, "I need a very discreet favor. We met in his lab at 6 in the evening when no one else was in the hospital. I handed him 3 pills from each of my medications. Analyze these pills, Charles. I need to know exactly what's in them. And please, don't mention this to anyone. Charles looked at me with that serious expression he had learned during his residency with me. Do you suspect something is wrong, doctor? I hope I'm wrong, I replied. But 45 years of experience tell me something isn't right. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. Every time I looked at the pills in my cabinet, I felt a mix of disbelief and terror. Was it possible that my own son was trying to kill me? I remembered when Philip was little, about 8 years old. He would come to visit me at the hospital. He would sit quietly in a chair in my office, watching me attend to patients. Dad, do you save lives? He would ask me with those bright, admiring eyes. Yes, son, I'd reply. It's the most important job in the world. After every successful surgery, Philip would run to hug me. My dad is a hero! He would shout down the hospital hallways. The nurses would laugh and give him candy. He was so proud to be Dr. Harrison's son. When did that admiration get lost? When did pride turn into greed? On Thursday morning, my phone rang. It was Charles. Doctor, I need to see you immediately. Come to the lab. His voice sounded tense, worried. I took a taxi and got to the hospital in 20 minutes. Charles was waiting for me with an expression I had never seen before, a mix of horror and disbelief. Dr. Harrison, he began, holding some papers with trembling hands. The results are here. I don't know how to tell you this. Tell me straight, Charles. I'm a doctor. I can handle it. Charles took a deep breath. The pills you brought me, they don't contain any active ingredients. Nothing. They're just starch, ground chalk, and a bit of food coloring. Perfect placebos, but placebos nonetheless. I felt as if I'd been hit in the chest with a hammer. My legs went weak, and I had to sit in the nearest chair. My whole world staggered in that moment. Are you sure? I managed to ask with a broken voice. Completely sure. I've analyzed each sample 3 times. Doctor, someone has been giving you fake pills. For months, from what I see in your health condition. The reality hit me like a tsunami. My son, my only son, the person I trusted most, had been trying to kill me, systematically, coldly, with the patience of a professional assassin. Imagine, friend, the moment when a man who dedicated 45 years to saving lives discovers that his own son has been trying to take his for 3 months. It's a pain that has no name. It's a betrayal that breaks something in the soul that can never be repaired. I returned home in a state of shock. Every step from the hospital to my condo was like walking in a nightmare. The streets of Chicago, which I loved so much, the historic buildings downtown, everything looked different, darker, as if I had discovered I was living in a world of lies. Once home, I re-examined all the medication boxes with new eyes. Now that I knew what to look for, the evidence was clear. All the boxes had been opened and resealed. The internal blister packs showed signs of tampering. The pills that seemed normal before now obviously looked different, more opaque, with a different texture. Philip had been very careful. He had gotten near-perfect replicas. Someone with experience had done this job. It wasn't an amateur operation. I sat at my desk and took out a notebook. With the precision of a medical examiner, I began to document everything: dates, observations, symptoms. Every detail could be important. Then came the most painful memory of all. 3 weeks ago, Philip had come over for dinner. We had made his favorite dish together, slow-roasted pulled pork. While we were eating, he asked me, "Dad, how are you feeling? Are the medications helping?" I had answered him, "I feel bad, son. Worse every day. But the doctor says it's normal after the heart attack." Philip had smiled. A smile that I now understood was not compassion, but satisfaction. "Don't worry, Dad. Everything will be fine soon." Soon. Now that word had a sinister meaning. Philip was waiting for me to die soon. That night, sitting in my armchair looking at the fake pills scattered on the coffee table, I felt a transformation inside me. The pain of the betrayed father slowly turned into the cold determination of the doctor. The man who had dedicated his life to justice in the operating room was not going to let this injustice go unpunished. Philip had made a fundamental mistake. He had underestimated his father. He had forgotten that I wasn't just a sick old man with a bad heart. I was Dr. Richard Harrison, the man who had trained half the doctors in Chicago, the one with connections in hospitals, labs, and the justice system. If he wanted to play a game of life and death, he was about to find out that his father knew the rules better than anyone. That night, sitting in my study surrounded by the evidence of Philip's betrayal, my mind began to travel back in time. 43 years ago, when Susan told me she was pregnant, I remember I was in the kitchen of our small downtown apartment making coffee after a 24-hour shift at the hospital. "Richard," she said with that shy smile, "I loved so much. We're going to be parents." In that moment, everything changed. I was no longer working just for the two of us. I was working for our son's future. From that day on, every dollar I earned had a destination: to give that child on the way everything I never had. I came from a humble family in rural Ohio. My father sold newspapers on a downtown square. My mother washed other people's clothes. I studied medicine on scholarships, working nights as an orderly in nursing homes to pay for my books. I swore my son would never know that struggle, that uncertainty of not knowing if there would be money for breakfast. When Philip was born in 1978, he was the most beautiful baby in the university hospital. He had his mother's big eyes, and I swore, the sharp intelligence of the Harrisons. The nurses adored him. "This boy's going to be a doctor like his dad," they said as they held him. From his first months, I started saving for his future. Not just in any way, friend. With the discipline of a soldier. Every month, I set aside exactly 30% of my income in a special account I named Philip's Future. Susan laughed at my obsession with the ledger where I noted every deposit. "You'll see," I told her, registering the numbers. "When Philip grows up, he'll have everything he needs." I worked double shifts, weekend calls, private consultations late into the night. My office on Monroe Street was filled with patients because I had a reputation for being meticulous and honest. Every extra dollar went straight into that sacred account. By the time Philip turned 5, we already had $100,000 saved. Susan wanted us to buy a new car, but I told her, "My love, the car can wait. Our son's education can't." Philip was a brilliant child, I swear. At 4, he already knew how to read. At 6, he was solving math problems that surprised his teachers. We enrolled him in the Chicago Academy, the best private school in the city. The tuition cost what many families earned in 3 months, but it was worth every penny to see my son come home with honor medals and academic excellence diplomas. On Saturday mornings, Philip would come with me to the hospital. He would put on a tiny white coat that Susan had made for him and walk the halls as if he owned the place. "Good morning, doctor," Philip, the nurses would say, and he'd reply with that comical seriousness of children. "Good morning. I need to check on my patients." Those were the happiest years of my life. Watching that smart, ambitious boy grow, knowing he had a bright future waiting for him. Every sacrifice made sense when I saw him studying at his desk, focused on his books like a little academic. In 1995, we decided to buy the condo on Michigan Avenue. It was an impossible dream for most American families. 2,000 square feet in the best building downtown, with a view of the lake and luxury finishes. The price was stratospheric. $1 million. "Are you crazy, Richard?" my brother asked when I told him. No one in our family has ever lived in a place like that. But I had a clear vision. Philip needed to grow up in an environment of success, surrounded by successful people. He needed to see that hard work and education could take you to the highest places. That condo wasn't just a home. It was a statement of principles. I paid half in cash with our 20 years of savings. The rest I financed over 10 years, working like I had never worked in my life. Surgeries from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, consultations on weekends, lectures in other states. Susan barely saw me, but she understood the sacrifice. "It's for Philip," she'd say when I arrived exhausted at 11 at night. "All of this is for our son." The day we moved into the new condo, Philip was 17 and about to enter college. I remember he looked out from the balcony and shouted, "Dad, you can see the whole city from here." His happiness made every extra hour of work worthwhile. By then, Philip had decided to study business administration at Northwestern University, the most expensive and prestigious university in the Midwest. The semester's tuition cost more than the annual salary of an average worker, but I never hesitated to pay it. "I want to be an entrepreneur, Dad," he told me during his freshman year. I want to create my own company and be successful like you." It filled me with pride to hear him. My son wouldn't just have a profession. He would have big ambitions. He would be a leader, a job creator, someone important in the community. During his university years, Philip lived like a prince. He had his own car. A new Jeep Cherokee I bought him for his 20th birthday. His friends envied him. He went out every weekend. He traveled on vacation to Cancun and Miami. He wore designer clothes. I never denied him anything. "Give him the best," Susan advised me. "A son who feels loved and valued will be a successful son." But there were signs that now, with the pain of betrayal, I can see clearly. Philip never asked how much things cost. He never showed real gratitude for the sacrifices we made. To him, money was just something that appeared when he needed it. When he graduated in 2000, we threw a spectacular party in the ballroom of the Drake Hotel. 100 guests, a live band, a gala dinner. I spent $25,000 on that celebration. But seeing Philip in his cap and gown, now a graduate in business administration, filled me with indescribable satisfaction. Now the good part begins. I told him that night as we toasted with French champagne. Now you're going to build your own empire. The first few years after college were complicated. Philip couldn't get a job at the major companies where he had interned. "The positions are all connections," he complained. "It's pure nepotism." After 8 months of searching, he decided it was better to start his own business. "Dad, I have an incredible idea," he told me one afternoon in 2001. "I'm going to open an Italian restaurant in the Gold Coast. I've studied the market, and it's a sure thing." The initial investment was $100,000. Almost everything we had saved that year. Susan had doubts. But I believed in my son. "He's young and ambitious," I told her. All successful entrepreneurs started by taking risks. The restaurant was called Bellinot, and for 3 months it seemed promising. Philip worked day and night, supervising every detail. He seemed to have found his calling. I went to eat there twice a week, proud to see my son running his own business. But in the 4th month, the problems began. Philip had no real management experience. Costs skyrocketed. Staff was stealing. The clientele wasn't what he expected. By the 6th month, the restaurant was in the red. "Dad, I need another $25,000 to save the business," he asked me one night with tears in his eyes. "It's just temporary. Until it picks up." I gave it to him, of course. But it was no use. 3 months later, Bellinot closed for good. $100,000 lost. 2 years of savings turned into nothing. Philip was devastated. "I'm sorry, Dad. I failed you." But I comforted him as I always did. "It doesn't matter, son. Failures are part of learning. Next time will be different." The next time came in 2003. A construction company focused on low-income housing. "Dad, the government is giving a lot of incentives for affordable housing. It's a guaranteed business." This time the investment was bigger, $200,000. We sold some investments Susan had. I took out a loan against the condo, all to believe in Philip, to give him another chance to prove his ability. The construction company lasted 8 months. Problems with permits, labor lawsuits, defective materials. Philip didn't have the experience or the maturity to handle such a complex business. Another failure, another massive loss. But what hurt me most wasn't the money. It was seeing how Philip began to change after these failures. He became resentful, bitter. He blamed the economy, the government, unfair competition. He never blamed himself. And the constant requests for money began. "Dad, I need money for a down payment on a condo." "Dad, my Jeep broke down. I need another one." "Dad, I found an incredible investment opportunity." Every time I asked him for specific details about these opportunities, he became evasive. "It's complicated to explain, Dad. Just trust me." By 2010, I had lost count of how much money I had given Philip. Millions of dollars that vanished into failed projects. Personal expenses. Ghost investments. Susan, who by then was battling breast cancer, she told me with her weak voice, "Richard, you have to set limits. Philip has to learn to stand on his own." But I couldn't. He was my only son. My only family after Susan died. When she passed in 2011, Philip was my only comfort. He came to the funeral. He hugged me. He cried with me. "Dad, now we only have each other," he told me. I'll always be with you. What bitter irony, right, friend? The son I had sacrificed everything for whom I had worked to exhaustion for 40 years, for whom I had spent millions of dollars, was now counting the days until my death. After the heart attack, when Philip offered to take charge of my medications, I thought he had finally matured. Dad, you took care of us your whole life. Now it's my turn to take care of you. He told me with a smile I believed was sincere. The first few months after the heart attack, Philip came to have dinner with me twice a week. He would arrive with bags from the pharmacy. He organized my pills in the weekly pill boxes. He made sure I took everything on time. Did you take your morning pill, Dad? He'd ask during dinner. You didn't forget your afternoon digoxin? I was moved by his attention. For the first time in years, Philip seemed genuinely concerned about someone other than himself. We prepared his childhood favorite dishes together, enchiladas, pulled pork. We talked about happy memories, about plans for the future. When you're fully recovered, we could take that trip to Europe you always wanted, he'd say, while watching me religiously take my fake pills. Paris, Rome, Madrid. You deserve it after a lifetime of such hard work. Now I understand that every one of those dinners was a macabre performance. Philip wasn't planning future trips with me. He was calculating how much longer he would have to wait until the fake pills did their job. During those evenings, I would tell him about my plans to renovate the condo, to update my will, to maybe sell some properties for more liquidity. Philip listened with feigned attention, asking specific questions about my investments, my bank accounts, my legal documents. It's important to have everything in order, Dad, he'd say. You never know what might happen. Yes, you never know that your own son might be planning your death. I'm going to confess something to you, friend. Philip's betrayal hurt me more than Susan's death, more than all the professional failures, more than any material loss I had ever suffered. Because Susan died loving me, fighting to live, to stay with me. Philip was deliberately killing me, with premeditation, calculating each fake pill as one more step toward his inheritance. 43 years of fatherhood, millions of dollars invested in his education, his businesses, his whims, thousands of hours of overtime to give him everything he wanted, decades of unconditional love, constant support, infinite forgiveness for his failures, and he paid me back by trying to murder me. That is the bitterest truth a father can face. To discover that the son you gave everything to, absolutely everything, considers your death the best investment he can make in his future. The morning after receiving the lab results from Charles, I woke up with a mental clarity I hadn't had in months. The initial shock had passed, and now the doctor in me was taking control. 45 years of professional experience had taught me that when you face a crisis, you must act with method and precision. My first thought was to call Peter Castle. Peter had been my classmate in medical school for the first 2 years before switching to law. Now he was one of the most respected lawyers in Chicago, specialized in criminal law. What I liked most about Peter was that he had never lost that brutal honesty he'd had since he was young. Peter, I said on the phone, I need to see you urgently. It's a very delicate matter. We met that same afternoon in his office on LaSalle Street. The building was impressive, with those bronze and marble elevators that made you feel the seriousness of the place. Peter received me in his office, surrounded by law books and diplomas attesting to 40 years of a successful career. Richard, he said after listening to the whole story, this is attempted murder, but we need solid, irrefutable proof. The lab testimony is fundamental, but it's not enough. Peter walked to his window overlooking Daley Plaza. Look, brother, I know how hard this must be for you. But if you really want to proceed, we need to build a case that no judge can dismiss. He explained that we needed to establish 3 elements: opportunity, motive, and method. The opportunity was clear. Philip was the one who bought and managed my medications. The motive was obvious, the inheritance. But the method required more investigation. Where does Philip buy the fake pills? How does he get them? Are other people involved? Peter asked me while taking notes in his legal pad. And most importantly, we need him to admit his involvement himself. That sentence stuck in my mind. We need him to admit his involvement himself. I left Peter's office with a clear mission. On the way home, my medical mind began to plan each step as if it were a complex surgery. Every detail had to be perfect, every move calculated. The next day I went to an electronics store on the Magnificent Mile. I felt strange buying a device to spy on my own son, but there was no alternative. I chose a small digital recorder, the size of a matchbox, with capacity for 8 hours of high-quality audio. It's to record medical lectures, I explained to the young salesman helping me. Lying was becoming a disgusting but necessary habit. For 3 days I practiced using the device. I turned it on and off until I mastered every button. I tested different locations in my study to find the spot with the best acoustics. Like any medical procedure, preparation was crucial for success. I also carefully planned what I would say to Philip. It had to be natural, convincing. It couldn't seem like an interrogation, or he would get defensive. I needed to create an atmosphere of trust, make him feel comfortable so he would talk freely. I decided to invite him for dinner on a Friday evening. I told him I wanted to thank him for all his help with the medications, that I was feeling better, and I wanted to celebrate. Philip accepted immediately, as he always did when it involved a free meal. That afternoon I prepared pulled pork, his favorite dish since childhood. While the meat cooked slowly in the oven, I took out a bottle of 1 8-year-old Chivas Regal whiskey that I had been saving for a special occasion. What irony that this special occasion was setting a trap for my own son. The Chivas Regal had a particular meaning for us. It was what we drank when Philip turned 21, when he graduated from college, when he opened his first business. We had always toasted with Chivas at the important moments of his life. At 6 o'clock sharp, Philip arrived, punctual as always. He wore a smile that I now recognize as fake, but at that moment it still partially fooled me. "How's my favorite dad?" he said with that forced joy he had perfected. "Very well, son," I replied, hugging him as I had thousands of times. "Every day I feel stronger thanks to the medications you get for me." The recorder was hidden under some newspapers on the coffee table, right next to where Philip always sat. I had tested the position several times, and the sound was picked up perfectly. We started the evening talking about trivial things. I asked about his current job, his friends, his plans. Philip was relaxed, confident. We served the pulled pork with warm tortillas and refried beans, exactly how he liked it since childhood. After dinner, I brought out the Chivas bottle and 2 crystal glasses that had belonged to Susan. "Let's make a toast, son," I said, "to your dedication, for taking such good care of your dad." Philip smiled and raised his glass. "To many more years together, Dad." Those words cut through me like a knife. Many more years together. When he was expecting the exact opposite. After the first sip, I started with the questions I had rehearsed. I had to be gradual, subtle. "Hey, Philip, I'm curious. Which pharmacy do you buy my medications from?" "Yesterday I spoke with Martin Gordon, your cousin Lucy's husband, and he told me he gets special discounts at Walgreens for his dad's medications." Philip took a long sip of whiskey before answering. "You go to different pharmacies, Dad, wherever it's cheapest. But don't you have one you trust? These medications are very specialized. They don't sell them just anywhere." I noticed Philip shift uncomfortably in his chair. His hands started to play with the whiskey glass, turning it nervously. "Yeah, I have my places. Don't worry about it." I kept pressing gently. "It's just that the other day I was talking with Michael Gordon, my cardiologist, and he told me there are a lot of fake medicines on the market. It scared me, you know. He recommended I only buy from certified pharmacies, with the proper permits." Philip became visibly tense. "Dad, why so many questions?" "I know what I'm doing. I've been buying your medicines for months, and nothing bad has happened." "You're right, son. I just want to be sure. These medications are expensive." "I don't want you to get ripped off. They are incredibly expensive." Philip suddenly exploded, with a vehemence that surprised me. "Every month I spend a fortune on your pills. It costs a fortune to keep you." That phrase was recorded perfectly. "It costs a fortune to keep you. But the money for the medications came from my own bank account." I gave him the exact amount the medicines cost according to the prescriptions. "A fortune?" I asked with a calm voice. "But I give you exactly what they cost, according to the prices you tell me." Philip immediately realized his mistake. His face turned red and he started to stutter. "Yeah, of course, Dad. I mean, it's a lot of money in general. For any family, it would be a lot of money." But the damage was done. Philip had revealed his true attitude. He saw caring for my health as a financial burden, not a duty. I decided to press a little more. "Son, could you bring me the receipts from the last few purchases?" I want to see exactly how much we're spending. Maybe I can talk to my health insurance to cover part of the costs. Philip almost choked on his whiskey. The receipts? I don't know if I have them. I don't usually keep those papers. How can you not have them? They're tax deductions, Philip. Medical expenses are fully deductible. I don't like dealing with paperwork, Dad. You know I'm bad at that stuff. It was a lie, and we both knew it. Philip had studied business administration. He knew perfectly well the importance of keeping tax records. The conversation became increasingly tense. Philip started drinking faster, filling his whiskey glass as if it were water. I kept the recorder running, capturing every word, every revealing pause. "Philip," I said, with the warmest voice I could muster, "I appreciate so much that you're taking care of my medications. Since the heart attack, it's been such a relief knowing you're handling everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." I hoped those words would calm him, maybe even make him feel guilty. But Philip only replied, "It's the least I can do, Dad. After all you've done for me. After all you've done for me." Another phrase with a double meaning that the recorder captured perfectly. At the end of the evening, Philip left earlier than usual. He was nervous, uncomfortable. He said goodbye quickly and left the condo almost at a run. When I listened to the recording that night, I had enough material to establish a pattern of suspicious behavior. But Peter was right. I needed more evidence. The next day I called Mary Lowe. Mary had been one of my brightest students in the 80s. Now she was the director of the forensic laboratory for the Illinois Attorney General's office. She had worked on hundreds of cases of poisoning and medication counterfeiting. "Dr. Lowe," I said, using the formal address I always used with my former students when it came to professional matters, "I need your help on a very delicate case." Mary received me in her lab on a Tuesday morning. The place impressed me. State-of-the-art equipment, electron microscopes, mass spectrometers, everything a forensic scientist could need. I gave her samples of all my fake medicines, and I explained the situation without mentioning that the suspect was my son. "I need to know exactly what these pills contain, and if possible, determine their origin." Mary, with that efficiency she had shown since she was a student, got to work immediately. "Dr. Harrison, this will take a few days, but I promise you a complete analysis." 3 days later, Mary called me with the results. "Doctor, this is very serious. The pills aren't just fake. They are homemade but professional. Whoever did this has knowledge of pharmacology and access to industrial tablet presses. Can you determine the origin? I'm working with some contacts in the pharmaceutical black market. This type of operation isn't common. There are very few people in Chicago capable of making such exact replicas." A week later, Mary had concrete information. "Doctor, I found the source. There's a clandestine lab in a rough neighborhood on the south side that produces fake medications for distribution in pirate pharmacies. The owner is named Jack Salazar. He's a pharmaceutical chemist, but his license was revoked 5 years ago for selling adulterated drugs. How can we connect this Salazar to my case?" "I already did," Mary said with a smile. "I spoke with my contacts in the state police. Salazar admitted that for the last 3 months he's been selling replicas of digoxin and metoprolol to a young man who paid in cash. The description perfectly matches the photo you showed me. It was Philip. Without a doubt. Now I had the complete chain. Philip bought the fake pills from a clandestine lab. He brought them home posing as the devoted son, and waited for the lack of real medication to kill me slowly. The next step was to involve the authorities. Through Mary, I contacted Robert Mason, the Assistant Attorney General, and another of my former students from the legal medicine courses I taught at the law school. Robert had been an exceptional student, one of those who asked intelligent questions, and always sought to understand not just the what, but the why of every forensic procedure. Now, 20 years later, he was one of the most respected figures in the Illinois justice system. "Dr. Harrison," he said when we met in his office, "this case is complex because it involves your family. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed legally?" That question tormented me for weeks. Did I really want to send my own son to prison? Wasn't there another way to resolve this? I spent entire nights awake, staring at my bedroom ceiling, remembering the child Philip had been, the little 8-year-old who hugged me when I came home tired from the hospital, The teenager who bragged to his friends that his dad was a doctor. The university student full of dreams and ambitions. But then I remembered the fake pills, the 3 months of my health deteriorating, the calculated coldness with which Philip had planned my death. It wasn't an impulsive decision on his part. It was a methodical plan, executed with the patience of a professional assassin. One afternoon, sitting in the armchair where I had so often consoled Philip after his business failures, I made the final decision. I called Robert Mason. "Robert," I said, "proceed with the case. My son tried to kill me. That cannot be forgiven." Regardless of family ties, Robert built the file with the efficiency of a consummate professional. He had the lab tests from Charles Harris, confirming my medicines were placebos. He had the forensic analysis from Mary Lowe, identifying the origin of the fake pills. He had the recording of my conversation with Philip, where he contradicted himself about the medication costs. He had the testimony of Jack Salazar, the illegal manufacturer, identifying Philip as his client. "It's a solid case, Doctor," Robert assured me. "Any judge will see there is sufficient evidence to charge him with attempted homicide." But I wanted to be absolutely sure. "Robert, is there any possibility that this is a misunderstanding? That Philip was deceived by someone else?" Robert reviewed all the documents again. "Doctor, your son paid cash for counterfeit drugs at a clandestine lab. He did it monthly for 3 months. He knew exactly what he was buying and what he was using it for. There is no way this was an accident." That confirmation reassured me and shattered me at the same time. My paternal instinct wanted to find an alternative explanation, anything to exonerate Philip. But my rational mind, trained in 4 decades of medicine, knew that Robert was right. Philip had tried to murder me. Period. The days leading up to his arrest were the most difficult of my life. Philip continued to visit me. He continued to bring me the fake medicines. He continued to feign concern for my health. Every conversation felt like a macabre play, where we were both acting roles we knew were false. "How are you feeling, Dad?" he would ask while organizing my fake pills in the weekly pill box. "Better, son," I'd reply. "Thanks to you." It was a dialogue of mutual lies. He knew he was poisoning me slowly. I knew that he knew. But we both maintained the charade. One night, 2 days before the arrest, Philip asked me something that chilled my blood. "Dad, did you update your will after the heart attack?" "Why do you ask that?" I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "It's just that a friend told me that after a heart attack, it's important to have all your documents in order. Just in case, you know? Just in case." Philip was making concrete plans for my death. He wasn't just killing me anymore. He was already thinking about the procedures afterward. That conversation eliminated any residual doubt I might have had about proceeding with the complaint. My son wasn't just a potential murderer. He was an impatient one. I told him yes, I had updated my will, that everything was in order. Philip smiled with satisfaction. He probably thought his plan was proceeding perfectly. If you're listening, friend, I want you to understand something important. Justice sometimes requires decisions that go against our most basic instincts. A father naturally protects his son, no matter what he's done, but there are lines that cannot be crossed. Betrayals that cannot be forgiven. When someone tries to kill you deliberately, systematically, for months, that person ceases to be your family. They become your enemy, no matter the blood you share. Philip had chosen to be my killer. Now I chose to be his nemesis. On Tuesday, March 28th, 2012, at 6:15 inches the morning, my phone rang. It was Philip. But his voice sounded completely different from any tone I had ever heard from him. It wasn't the voice of the loving son he pretended to be, nor that of the failed businessman asking for money. It was the voice of a cornered animal. "Dad, you have to help me. The police are here. They say I'm being arrested for attempted murder. This is crazy. You have to call your lawyer and fix this misunderstanding." I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to my son scream into the phone, while the state police officers read him his rights. After 45 years of receiving emergency calls at the hospital, I perfectly recognized the sound of genuine desperation. But this time, I felt no compassion. I felt relief. "Philip," I said calmly, "I can't help you. This is not a misunderstanding." There was a terrible silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard them take the phone from him. An officer spoke to me. "Dr. Harrison? This is the Attorney General's office. Your son is being arrested for attempted homicide. We will need your testimony in the coming hours." That morning, I got dressed in the navy blue suit I used for important medical conferences. If I was going to testify against my own son, I would do it with the dignity the moment required. I combed my hair carefully. I put on the tie Susan had given me for our 20th anniversary, and I looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back at me was 71 years old, but his eyes showed the determination of someone who had made the most difficult decision of his life. Robert Mason called me 2 hours later. "Doctor, Philip is at the station. His lawyer, Mr. Ramirez, is asking for bail on a misdemeanor. But we are going for aggravated attempted homicide. He's not getting out easily." Over the next few days, the local papers began to cover the case. "Doctor accuses son of attempted murder with fake medicines," the headlines read. It was humiliating to see our names in the news. But it was also necessary. People had to know that these kinds of crimes do not go unpunished, regardless of family ties. Philip's first interrogation was 3 days after his arrest. Robert allowed me to observe from an adjoining room with a one-way mirror. Seeing my son sitting at that metal table, handcuffed, dressed in the orange prison jumpsuit, broke my heart despite everything he had done. Mr. Ramirez, a young lawyer Philip had hired with money he had probably stolen from me, tried to build a defense based on ignorance. "My client did not know the medicines were fake," he repeated constantly. He was the victim of fraud by the supplier. But Robert was relentless. He had done his homework perfectly. "Your client visited Jack Salazar's clandestine lab for 3 consecutive months. He paid cash specifically for replicas of cardiac medications. How do you explain that an innocent person deliberately seeks out an illegal lab to buy fake medicines?" Philip was sweating profusely. His hands trembled as he tried to answer. I thought they were cheaper generic medicines. Mr. Salazar told me they were equivalent to the brand name." "Then why didn't you ask Salazar for tax receipts? Why did you lie to your father about where you bought the medicines? Why did you never keep proof of purchase?" With every question from Robert, Philip sank deeper. His answers became contradictory, nervous. It was obvious he was lying. And badly. "Look, counsel," Philip finally said to Robert, "my dad is very old. He's sick with his heart. Sometimes he gets confused. He imagines things. Maybe he changed his medicines himself and now he doesn't remember." That was the last straw. Hearing Philip suggest that I had senile dementia, that I had invented the whole case out of mental confusion, filled me with a cold rage I had never felt before. Robert looked at Philip with professional contempt. "Philip Harrison," he said, using his name with sarcasm, "are you suggesting that a cardiologist with 45 years of experience, who trained half the doctors in Chicago, cannot distinguish between real and fake medicines?" Philip didn't know what to answer. The legal process lasted 4 months. 4 months during which Philip kept trying to contact me from jail, sending me letters that alternated between pathetic pleas and veiled threats. "Dad, this is going to destroy our family name," he wrote in one letter. "People are going to think the Harrisons are a dysfunctional family." In another letter, he was more direct. "If you go through with this, we will never reconcile. You will die alone and bitter, with no family." I kept all his letters as additional evidence of his manipulative character. The trial began on a Monday in July. The courtroom of the Cook County Superior Court was packed. Medical colleagues, neighbors, journalists, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone wanted to witness the spectacle of a father criminally accusing his own son. Philip arrived at the trial dressed in a gray suit that I recognized immediately. It was the same one I had bought him for his university graduation. His strategy was obvious, to try to look like the devoted and successful son he had never really been. The prosecutor, Mr. Jorge Martinez, presented the case with the precision of a surgeon. He began by explaining my medical career, my impeccable reputation, the 45 years saving lives. Then he described my heart attack, the medical prescription for specific drugs, and how Philip had voluntarily offered to take charge of buying them. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Martinez said in a solemn voice, "the defendant not only tried to kill his father, he did it in the cruelest way possible, slowly, making him believe he was receiving medical treatment, while in reality he was poisoning him with his calculated negligence. Mr. Ramirez's defense was pathetic. He tried to present Philip as a confused son, who had been deceived by unscrupulous criminals. My client is the victim of a pharmaceutical scam. He genuinely believed he was buying legal generic medicines. But when the witnesses' testimonies began, Philip's defense completely crumbled. Charles Harris took the stand dressed in his white chief pharmacist's coat. He explained to the jury the process he had followed to analyze my medicines, the equipment used, the results obtained. The pills contained no active ingredients, he concluded. They were placebos professionally crafted to deceive a cardiac patient. Mary Lowe was even more devastating. As a forensic expert, she presented evidence that directly linked the fake pills found in my house with Jack Salazar's clandestine lab. The samples are identical in composition, manufacturing method, and origin of materials, she testified. There is no doubt they come from the same illegal source. Michael Gordon, my cardiologist, explained to the jury the medical consequences of abruptly stopping cardiac medication. A patient in Dr. Harrison's condition, without his real medications, would have died within 3 to 6 months maximum, he said gravely. What the defendant did is equivalent to a slow death sentence. But the most shocking moment of the trial came when Robert asked to play the recording of my conversation with Philip. The room fell completely silent as my son's voice came out of the audio system speakers. They are incredibly expensive. Every month I spend a fortune on your pills. It costs a fortune to keep you. When those words echoed in the courtroom, I saw several jurors look at each other with expressions of disgust. The coldness with which Philip referred to the cost of keeping me alive was evident to everyone. The prosecutor paused the recording. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, note that the defendant talks about keeping you, referring to his father, as if he were a financial burden, and he talks about the money as if it were his, when in reality, Dr. Harrison gave him the exact amount needed to buy the real medications. They continued playing the recording. Philip's nervous voice when I asked him about the receipts, his contradictions about the pharmacies where he supposedly shopped, his irritation when I pressed for more details. Everything was exposed to the jury. Philip, sitting at the defendant's table, had his head down. His lawyer tried to take notes, but it was clear he had no way to refute such overwhelming evidence. When it was Philip's turn to testify in his own defense, it was a disaster. He took the stand visibly nervous, sweating despite the courtroom's air conditioning. "I never wanted to hurt my dad," he began with a trembling voice. "He's the most important thing I have in my life. This is all a terrible misunderstanding." The prosecutor destroyed him on cross-examination. "Mr. Harrison, why did you specifically visit a clandestine lab to buy fake medicines if your intention was to help your father?" "I didn't know it was clandestine." "Didn't it seem suspicious that Mr. Salazar operated from a basement on the south side, with no visible licenses, asking for cash only?" I thought. "Didn't it strike you as odd that these generic drugs cost $100 when the originals cost $2,000? Philip had no coherent answers. He contradicted himself constantly. He stammered. He looked exactly like what he was, a desperate liar trying to save his own skin. The most dramatic moment came during the closing arguments. The prosecutor had finished his devastating presentation. The defense attorney had made a last pathetic attempt to sow doubt, and the judge was about to call a recess when Philip suddenly stood up from his seat. "Dad," he shouted, turning to where I was sitting in the witness gallery. "Dad, forgive me. I didn't mean to do this. It was stupid. It was crazy. Drop the charges, please." The entire courtroom fell silent. The guards moved toward Philip to control him, but the judge waved for them to wait. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. I rose slowly from my seat. I walked until I was in front of Philip, separated only by the rail that divided the gallery from the trial area. My son had tears streaming down his cheeks, his hands outstretched to me in supplication. For a moment, for one painful second, my father's heart wanted to give in. I saw the 5-year-old boy running to me when I came home from the hospital. The teenager bragging to his friends about his doctor dad. The university student full of dreams. But then I remembered the fake pills, the 3 months of physical agony, the calculated coldness with which he had planned my death. the fake smile as he watched me take the placebos night after night. "Philip," I said, my voice clear, resonating throughout the courtroom. "For 45 years I dedicated my life to saving lives. You dedicated 3 months to trying to take mine. Let the court decide what to do with that." Philip collapsed into his chair. His lawyer tried to calm him, but my son began to sob uncontrollably. "You're a monster!" he suddenly screamed at me, with a rage I had never seen in him. "All my life you controlled me with your money. You never let me be independent. You were always a tyrant. Order in the court," shouted the judge, banging his gavel. But Philip continued, "I hate you. I wish you had died from your heart attack. The money is mine by right. I'm your only heir." Those words were his sentence. The jury heard Philip's true nature, a man who considered my death his right, that my money belonged to him more than my own life. The guards finally dragged him from the courtroom, as he continued to scream incoherencies about inheritance and injustice. The judge declared a 2-hour recess for deliberation. They were the longest 2 hours of my life. I walked the courthouse halls, remembering moments from Philip's childhood that now felt like scenes from a movie about another family. I remembered when he was 6 and he got sick with bronchitis. I spent 3 nights without sleep caring for him, giving him medicine every 4 hours, putting damp cloths on his forehead when he had a fever. Susan would tell me, "Richard, rest a little, I'll take over." But I couldn't. He was my son, my responsibility, my greatest love. I remembered when he learned to ride a bike in the park. I ran behind him for an hour, holding him so he wouldn't fall. When he finally managed to pedal on his own, he shouted, "Dad, look, I did it!" His happiness was my happiness. His triumph was my triumph. I remembered the nights when I read him stories before bed. His favorite was Pinocchio, the story of the wooden puppet who wanted to become a real boy. "Dad," he would ask me, "what makes a person real?" "Honesty, son," I'd reply. "Real people always tell the truth." What bitter irony. I taught him that honesty was the most important thing, and he grew up to become a professional liar. When the jury returned to the courtroom, the foreman stood up to read the verdict. In the case of the state versus Philip Harrison, on the charge of aggravated attempted homicide, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Philip collapsed in his chair as if he'd been shot. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but my son shoved it away. The judge proceeded immediately to sentencing. "Philip Harrison, you have been found guilty of attempting to murder your own father through the deliberate supply of counterfeit medication. This crime shows a calculated cruelty and a family betrayal that offends the most basic values of our society." Philip raised his head to look at the judge. His eyes no longer showed supplication, but pure hatred. "I sentence you to 12 years in state prison. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served at least 8 years. The judge's gavel struck like a gunshot in the room. Philip began to scream again. "This is unfair! It's my dad! I had a right to my inheritance!" "He owes me everything." The guards took him away as he continued to shout threats and accusations. His voice faded down the courthouse halls, but his last words reached me clearly. "When I get out of prison, you're going to pay for this." That was the last time I saw my son as a free man. I left the courthouse that afternoon with mixed feelings. On one hand, I had the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. A criminal had been punished, regardless of family ties. On the other hand, I had forever lost the only son I had, the only family I had left in the world. That night, sitting in my condo, watching the news report the verdict, I wondered if I had done the right thing. Was it worth destroying my own family for the principles of justice? The answer came when I remembered the words Philip had shouted in court. "The money is mine by right." He had shown no remorse for trying to kill me. His only concern was securing his inheritance. A son who sees his father as an obstacle to his enrichment is not really a son. He is an enemy who shares your blood, but not your values. If you're listening, friend, understand this. True love sometimes requires decisions that break your heart. Protecting a criminal because he is your family is not love. It's complicity. Sometimes justice must matter more than blood. 12 years in prison for Philip. 12 years to reflect on what he had done. To perhaps, hopefully, find some redemption in his rotted soul. I was 71 years old. With a little luck and the right medications, I might live long enough to see if my son managed to become a decent human being. But honestly, I didn't have much hope left. The days following the trial were strange, friend. For the first time in months, I started taking my real medications. Charles Harris had gotten me the original prescriptions. And every morning, opening the pill box, I saw the real pills that would keep my heart working. It was like waking up from a medical nightmare. In 3 weeks, my condition improved dramatically. The swelling in my legs disappeared. The shortness of breath that tormented me was reduced to almost nothing. And for the first time since the heart attack, I could climb the stairs to my building without stopping to rest. It's incredible, I told Michael Gordon at my next checkup. I feel like I've been resurrected. Dr. Harrison, Michael replied with that professional smile, your heart was literally dying, little by little. Now that you're receiving the proper treatment, it's normal to feel reborn. I was 71. But I felt energetic enough to live another decade. Maybe 2. The question was, what to do with those extra years that Philip had tried to steal from me. The answer came one October afternoon when I received a call from Dr. Patricia Edwards, the dean of the Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. Patricia had been my resident 15 years ago, a brilliant student who now ran one of the most prestigious medical schools in the country. Dr. Harrison, she said over the phone, we've been following your case in the news. We want to offer you a position to return as a consulting professor. Our students need to learn not just medicine, but also professional ethics. You represent both. The proposal intrigued me immediately. To return to the classrooms, to share 45 years of experience with a new generation of doctors, it was exactly what I needed to give meaning to this second chance at life. I started teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the mornings. Medical ethics and clinical decision-making. That was the official name of the course, but I called it How to Be a Real Doctor. The students arrived expecting boring theory and found themselves with real stories from 45 years in operating rooms. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd say in my first class each semester, medicine is not about memorizing books. It's about saving real human lives, with real families, with real problems. Every decision you make as doctors will have consequences that last forever. I told them cases from my career, but always with an ethical lesson. The patient who arrived with a heart attack on Easter Sunday, and how I decided to cancel the family dinner to operate on him. The 5-year-old girl with a congenital heart defect, whose parents had no money for the surgery, and how I organized a collection among my colleagues to pay for it. The wealthy businessman who wanted to skip the transplant list, and why I told him that money doesn't buy hearts. The students adored me. At the end of each semester, they would line up to take photos with me and ask me to sign their medical textbooks. Dr. Harrison, they'd say, you taught us that being a doctor is being a hero. No, I always corrected them. Being a doctor is being human. Heroes are in the movies. Doctors are in hospitals, doing our jobs with honesty and with passion. But there was something deeper I wanted to do with my new life. At night, sitting in my study looking at Susan's photos, I began to plan something that would give permanent meaning to everything I had lived through. I called Esther Moore, the most respected notary in Chicago, and an old classmate of Susan's. Esther had handled our legal affairs for decades, from buying the condo to the will I made after the heart attack. Esther, I said when we met in her elegant office on State Street, I want to completely change my will. Everything I have, absolutely everything, I want to donate to the university. Esther looked at me in surprise. She had reviewed my finances many times. She knew exactly how much my estate was worth. Richard, we're talking about $5 million between the condo, your investments, and your savings. Are you completely sure? I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I explained my plan in detail. All my money would become a scholarship fund for medical students from poor families. Not just any student, but specifically those who came from the same poverty I knew in my youth. Children of street vendors, of domestic workers, of farmers who dreamed of their children becoming doctors. The resources Philip wanted to obtain through my death, I told Esther, as she took notes, are now going to save lives through the education of new doctors. It's poetic justice. Esther worked for 2 months on the legal aspects. We established the Susan Harrison Foundation for Medical Education, named in honor of my wife. The fund would grant 20 full scholarships each year, covering not only tuition but also books, materials, and even a small monthly stipend for living expenses. The day I signed the new will, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced since Susan's death. Now, I told myself, my money is going to do exactly what I did for 45 years. Save lives. The first scholars of the Susan Foundation were selected in January 2014. I perfectly remember the awards ceremony in the main auditorium of the medical school. 20 young people between 18 and 20 years old, all with stories of poverty and determination that reminded me of my own youth. There was Mary Ellen Rogers, the daughter of a woman who sold tamales at a local market. She had studied in high school while working weekends as a waitress to help with family expenses. "Dr. Harrison," she said with tears in her eyes when I handed her the scholarship letter, "my mom says you're an angel. I'm going to be the first doctor in my family." There was Joseph L. Martin, whose father was a construction worker and had lost a leg in an accident. Joseph had been the top of his class at a public high school on the south side. "Sir?" "Doctor," he said, "I'm going to study trauma surgery to help people like my dad." Each story broke my heart and filled me with hope at the same time. These young people had the same hunger for advancement that I had 50 years ago. The difference is that they wouldn't have to work at night to pay for their books. They could concentrate completely on becoming the best doctors possible. I started a tradition of meeting with the scholars once a month. I took them to eat at Jean and Georgetti's, a traditional steakhouse where I had celebrated my medical graduation decades ago. During those meals, they told me about their subjects, their difficulties, their professional dreams. "Doctor," asked Sandra Morris, a shy young woman from a working-class suburb who wanted to specialize in pediatrics, "how did you know you wanted to be a doctor?" "My child," I'd reply, as we ate roast lamb. "It wasn't that I chose medicine. Medicine chose me. When you see that you can save a life with your hands and your knowledge, you can't do anything else." Over time, the scholars became like my adopted children. They sent me photos of their first surgeries as residents. They invited me to their weddings. They sent me cards on my birthday. Each of their successes was also my success. Every life they saved was also a life I had helped save. By 2016, there were already 300 doctors graduated with scholarships from the Susan Foundation, working in hospitals all over the country. Cardiaque surgeon, pédiatricien, gynécologiste, neurosurgeon, all carried my teaching that medicine is service, not business. Meanwhile, Philip wrote me sporadic letters from state prison. The first letters, during 2012 and 2013, were full of rage and resentment. "Dad, you have me rotting in jail because of your pride," he'd write in sloppy handwriting on cheap paper. "When I get out, there will be nothing left of our family. I hope you're happy." Other letters were more manipulative. "Dad, I've reflected on what happened. I understand I made mistakes, but 12 years is too much punishment for your own son. The other inmates tell me you are very cruel to me." I kept all his letters in a shoebox, but I never answered them. Not because I couldn't forgive him, but because I knew Philip still didn't truly understand what he had done. His letters spoke of mistakes and misunderstandings, never of attempted murder. Until he recognized the full truth, any communication would be useless. The letters became less frequent over time. In 2017, I received the last one. "Dad, I'm up for parole in 2 years. I've changed a lot in here. I'd like for us to talk when that happens." After that letter, absolute silence. Maybe Philip had finally understood that some betrayals cannot be repaired with words. I had learned something important during those years. Forgiving does not mean reconciling. You can free your heart from hatred without necessarily restoring a relationship. Forgiveness is for your own peace, not to please the one who hurt you. In the afternoons, after my classes at the university, I would sit on my balcony watching the sunset over the Chicago skyline. The city spread out before me like a map of memories. The hospital where I worked for 45 years. The church where I married Susan. The streets where I walked with Philip when he was a child. Sometimes I wondered if I had been too hard on my son. Is a father who sends his own son to prison a man of principle, or just a cruel man? The answer came every time I received a graduation photo from one of my scholars. Mary Ellen, the tamale vendor's daughter. She had become the best pediatric surgeon of her generation. Joseph, the construction worker's son. He now directed the trauma department at the university hospital. Sandra, the shy girl from the suburbs. She had opened a free clinic for poor children. These young people were saving lives every day, thanks to the education my money had financed. If I had given that same money to Philip as an inheritance, how many lives would have been saved? 0. Philip would have spent it all on more failed businesses, more unnecessary luxuries, more grandiose dreams without substance. Justice is not just about punishing evil, but about rewarding good. My scholars represented everything Philip never was: hard-working, honest, dedicated to serving others. In my last years, I surrounded myself with a chosen family. My students, my scholars, my colleagues. They visited me regularly. They called me on the phone to consult me on difficult cases. They invited me to their family events. It was a family united not by blood but by shared values. Dr. Edwards organized monthly dinners, where the most experienced doctors in Chicago shared experiences with the new generations. I was always the guest of honor, not because of my age, but because of my story. The young doctors wanted to hear about the case that had marked my life. Dr. Harrison, someone invariably asked me during those dinners, "Do you regret reporting your son?" "Never," I'd answer without hesitation. A father who protects a criminal son isn't being loving, he's being an accomplice. True love sometimes requires painful decisions. I explained that reporting Philip had been the last act of fatherly love I could give him. I gave him the opportunity to face the consequences of his actions, and perhaps become a better person. If I had covered for him, he would have died an unpunished murderer. I turned 80 inches 2021, surrounded by more than 200 doctors who had been my students over the decades. The celebration was in the hospital's event hall where I worked my entire life. My scholars had prepared a video with testimonies from all the doctors who had received support from the Susan Foundation. "Dr. Harrison," said Mary Ellen in the video, now a 30-year-old woman with a brilliant career, "you didn't just give me a scholarship. You gave me a future. You gave me dignity. You gave me the opportunity to serve others as you taught us." One after another, hundreds of young doctors appeared on screen, thanking not only the financial help, but the life lessons they had received. "You taught us that medicine is a calling, not a profession," said one. "You showed us that character matters more than knowledge," added another. That night, as I watched the video in my apartment, I mentally calculated how many lives my scholars had saved in their careers. It was tens of thousands of successful surgeries, early diagnoses, effective treatments. My money had generated a cascade of life that would continue to expand for generations. Philip, meanwhile, had been released from prison in 2019. I learned through third parties that he lived in a modest neighborhood, working as an insurance salesman. He never tried to contact me after his release. Maybe he had finally understood that some doors close forever. I felt no resentment toward him, but no nostalgia either. It was like remembering someone I had known in another life, a person who had existed, but no longer had relevance in my present. The last years of my life were the most satisfying. Every morning I woke up knowing that day I would teach something valuable to future doctors, or I would receive news of a scholar who had achieved a new professional success. My money worked day and night saving lives, exactly as I had done for 45 years. In 2025, at 84, my health began to decline gradually. It wasn't dramatic, just the natural wear and tear of a heart that had lived a full life. Michael Gordon explained that we could extend my life with more aggressive procedures, but I told him no. "Michael," I said during my last consultation, "I have lived 84 extraordinary years. I have been a doctor, a husband, a father, a teacher. I have saved thousands of lives. And I have created a legacy that will continue to save lives long after my death. I'm ready." I died on a Tuesday in March 2026 in my bed, surrounded by Patricia Edwards, Charles Harris, Mary Lowe, and a dozen of my closest scholars. There was no pain, no suffering, just a sense of completeness, of mission accomplished. My last words were to the young doctors crying by my bed. Keep saving lives. Keep the legacy of the Susan Foundation alive. And always remember, medicine is love in action. My funeral was a demonstration of the impact a well-lived life can have. More than 1,000 people filled the Holy Name Cathedral. Doctors, nurses, patients I had saved decades ago, scholars with their families, university professors, health authorities. Philip did not attend. I didn't expect him to. On my tombstone at my own request they engraved a simple phrase, Richard Harrison, 1941 to 2026. Doctor, teacher, benefactor. He saved lives with his hands, his teachings, and his generosity. The Susan Foundation continues to operate to this day. Funded by the perpetual endowment I established, every year, 20 poor but brilliant young people receive the opportunity to become doctors without the financial burden I had to endure. If you're listening, friend, I want you to remember this. We are not obligated to tolerate betrayals, even from our own family. Self-respect and justice must be placed above blood ties. True family is chosen by shared values, not by genetics. I lived 86 years and died with a clear conscience, knowing that even my money posthumously continues to save lives instead of ending up in the hands of the one who tried to take mine. That is the difference between existing and living with purpose. Principles are not negotiated, dignity is not for sale, and a legacy is built with right decisions, not easy ones.